And then if you're looking at, other ways to get involved with Carbon Conversations TO, we do also offer climate cafes, which is a space for people to come together and just talk about how they're feeling about climate change. And we've got another cafe planned for December, TBD. So you can visit our website or sign up to our newsletter to get the latest updates on exactly when it's going to be. And our newsletter also has some other kind of cool, fun stuff if you're in this kind of climate psychology and climate emotions type space. So again, we're going to be here for an extra 15 minutes for anyone that has questions, but otherwise we're just want to say thank you so much for giving us your attention.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Brianna. That was really, really insightful and useful and just deeply practical. Really appreciate your energy and expertise and time. Thank you so much to everyone who showed up today. Appreciate your time and attention as well. So we'll officially close the workshop. Wow, we were right on time. Look at that. So the workshop is officially done. But Brianna and Amy will stick around for 15 more minutes in case there are any questions. I didn't see any come into the chat during the workshop, but if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you have questions and you need to go now, we will record the Q&A session and send that in the follow-up email. So you can always put your question in the chat, knowing you'll get the recording. But for those of you who have to go right on the half hour, thank you so much for being here and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you.
Bye. And for those of you who are sticking around, I assume that's because you might have a question or want to be here for the Q&A. So I'm just seeing one from Matt. Looking for a few thoughts about a more formal discussion with colleagues. And then he says, might be best to explain live, so to speak.
Great. Yeah, let's, I don't actually see, oh, there we go. Yeah, Matt, feel free to unmute yourself and share.
Great, thanks. So I'm a school board trustee, and one of the things that I'm looking at doing is having conversations to move not only my own board, but provincially other boards in this direction. And so let's say I put something on the agenda and it's set up to talk, but as we've spoken about before, other people in the room might not be in the right mood. There's distress, there's anxiety. I know that if I'm trying to bring it up and there's a larger body of people, I don't know if there are ways in which maybe I can do things to prepare and practice, as you say, because I love that idea, but it's in my role, the way I can move this forward is quite publicly and through school boards. So I'd be curious to get a sense of your response to that. You can probably hear the anxiety in my voice already.
Yeah, and also sounds sounds like you have some really cool opportunity to make and influence some pretty big decision makers. So that's really, really cool and exciting. And I hope that you don't, I know, I was going to say, I hope that you don't feel like a ton of pressure to do that.
No.
Because that can totally, like, if I was in that position, I'd be like, oh my gosh. So yeah. So just to be clear on the question, it's more like, how can I maybe bring this up in a way that people will actually be like open to hearing about it and listening to it, kind of thing? Is that what the main thing that you're trying to get at is?
Yeah, I think so, because my role would be to present motions, to present ideas and things on an agenda that's quite sort of in an official capacity. Therefore, you're looking at more like fact driven in a sense to lead. I know that's dangerous, of course, but it's hard to sort of say where's the empathy coming from and what kind of approach would I take. I could talk about my feelings about where it is and what's going on with the environment and why I'm concerned about it. But yeah.
And Amy, I have some thoughts. Do you
Yeah,
wanna?
go for it.
Yeah, and so I think one thing to notice, like facts and emotions don't need to be like, it's not like it's one or the other, right? It's more that I think we live in a world that overly prioritizes facts and right forgets about emotions. So I don't know exactly how school board trustee setting works, but if I were in a workspace scenario, which I can relate to, I think what I would do is just again think about the individuals. It's a bit of strategic planning as well, right? Who are the people at the table? Can you have individual conversations with people to get a gauge of where they're at? How do they feel about climate change? Like the personal part is going to be tricky because you're in a professional setting, but like, how do they feel around climate change connected to the work you're doing? And so you're kind of trying to gauge, is there defensiveness? Who are the people who are saying yes to me, and how can I then start working with them? And so gauging those individual connections and also getting the mood that you have between them. And then perhaps when you are starting the conversation, see if it's appropriate to start with a personal story of why you think it's a really important issue to bring up. And like, there's so much statistics out there around youth and like the high levels of anxiety. Mental health is it's a big issue right after the pandemic. So you can always have that as a back end of how you can connect it to the priorities that your province or your school board or your parents might have. And then I don't know if you know parents, right? Like can there's someone who could talk with some parents and see if you can gauge some support. And then if in the meeting things are starting to take a little sour, maybe don't be afraid of saying, I'm feeling a lot of tension in this room right now. Like maybe we just all need to take a deep breath. And so those are some ways that you might be able to apply it in that meeting. Or if something happened really intense and I don't know, maybe it doesn't make sense to talk immediately, but I don't know how often these meetings happen. So that's just a little bit. And a lot of what we are sharing with you is the knowledge of wonderful Rosemary Randall, who is a climate psychologist. And she came from she's from the UK, and she wrote Carbon Conversations Facilitator Guide and a textbook called In Time for Tomorrow that has a chapter on how to talk about climate change. So maybe we can share that on the follow-up email, Janwa, because then you might want to give that a read as well, because she does have some tips around climate conversations that are more around like strategic, like policy moving things. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Brianna. Tanya, I see your hand. I'm just going to go to Brian because his question was happened right after Matt's, and then I'll go to you, Tanya. So Brian had asked, I really appreciate your question, Brian. It definitely came into my mind too. So he asks, if the objective is not to convince, what is the objective?
I would say the objective is to understand. So I think it's so easy to fall into this sense of like, if we're, our planet is on fire and we need as many people as possible. And this is a fact, like this is true. We need as many people as possible to take action. And I mentioned this kind of paradox of empathy, which can be so difficult to actually practice, which is when we actually are genuinely there for just to understand the person and just to like connect, maybe connect is the better objective. Regardless of what is being said, if there's that sense of connection, that there's a little more higher likelihood for that person to open up into changing their behavior or thinking about the possibility of changing without us actually needing that agenda of convincing in our minds, if that makes sense. Did you want to add anything, Brianna?
Yeah, because it's tricky one, right? Because I'm definitely in a way trying to convince people to take action, but I'm also trying to not think that way, right? Because and I'm just trying to be human. And like, I think sometimes what helps me is like a reminder that deep inside, maybe perhaps when I see my little cutie pie baby, that like, you know, we're all like, we come from a place of love. And I think we're ultimately all looking for safety and safety to be in this world. And so now what that looks like and how we get there is going to be very different depending on our upbringing and our situations, all these different stories of life. And so I'm never going to really understand why a person is opposing to this, right? Why did a person vote for a candidate that I didn't want to vote for? Like, what is happening there? And so if I'm just trying to convince that individual, then you're only hearing my side of the story and you're just missing the full picture. You're missing the why that person is doing those actions. And so then you're not going to advance. You're not going to go anywhere. So for a quick example, I remember talking to a really close friend of mine who loves nature, like it's so deeply connected, volunteers with Girl Guides, and she loves her like Jeep and her big car and driving to go to these beautiful nature spots, and like it's harming Earth, even though she loves Earth. And as I started talking with her, trying to not, you know, convince and just trying to truly listen, I started hearing that part of why she likes that big car is because people tend to judge her because she's a small woman and think she's weak and doesn't have power. And she feels powerful when she's in that car. And so like, I would have never gotten to understand why she's acting that way unless I like truly just stopped from talking and really listening to her and realized, you know, for her, the climate change issue is also related to how we treat women who look smaller and weak, and her sense of trying to be powerful. So I think that's why our objective is connection, because connection is going to get us further into a world where we're caring more for Earth than each other. While if we focus on convincing, I don't think we're going to get anywhere because no one's going to listen to each other.
Well, what my point really is, you're perfectly right about connection. And my thought is that the objective is to find that connection. That's the objective of talking to somebody. And as I put in the chat earlier, to use a good example, the cost of living is something that everybody is concerned about, and is I think a wonderful start. The cost of food, the cost of living, the cost of gas that's one of those things that everybody sees as something they're concerned about. So I really I'm learning as I'm talking, because I've had a lot of failures in having climate conversations. But the more I think about it, the more I think about the things about climate that everybody is concerned about, and food is a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, and trying to see what that individual you're talking with, what's in top of their mind, right? And then that will help guide you.
Yeah.
And I
Um,
think, sorry, Brian, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I have to go.
Oh,
But
okay.
this
Thank you
is-
so much.
Take care, Brian.
This was very good. Thank you.
Just to say, Brian, every conversation you have, if you learn something from it, I would invite you to not consider it as a failure.
Yeah, I'm right you are. Thank you.
Okay,
Take care.
thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Just seeing
Yeah.
we have a couple more minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to your question, Tanya.
My question was really being delighted with you're presenting the program that you've presented. And when I started working on the climate issues, I realized that what makes people have difficulty talking about it and was creating a problem for myself is what bothers all people, which is fear. That's why people vote for someone that you don't want to vote for, is they're fearful. So when we have these conversations, you very clearly express how to judge people's emotions and to quiet that fear in ourselves and in the other person, and come at it with love and connection. And just for you, Matt, I also, in addition to appreciating Amy and Brianna, I really appreciate what you're doing, Matt, because and one of the things I did was talk to kids in boys and girls clubs. And I said, okay, we're going to talk about the environment. And they said, you mean about reuse, reduce, and recycle? So the schools are doing an amazing job. So thank you so much, everyone. Lovely to meet all of you.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much, Tanya.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I feel like that 15 minutes flew by. We're at 45 past the hour. I'm on the Pacific coast. I know Wyan's over on the Atlantic coast, so it's 9:45 where you are, Wyan, and I think we're a mix of geographies here. But yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for your time and energy, and I will send a follow-up email with additional resources, with that book that was mentioned, with the slides, and with a recording of the Q&A, and also with how to stay in touch with Carbon Conversations Toronto and with For Our Kids, if you'd like to.
I have to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Super
much,
lovely.
everyone.
And
Such
so
you.
interesting
pleasure.
questions too.
Yeah.